Oh, there we go. All right. All right, thank you both for being here. I'm going to have you introduce yourselves in just a second. Really quickly, I'm Erica Brescia. Really grateful to be here and to be an investor in Sourcegraph. Very proud to be a part of this journey. We've also invested in a bunch of other AI and foundation model companies, so I'm really been looking forward to this conversation. I don't think you invited me here because I'm an investor, though. I think you invited me here because I used to be the CEO of GitHub when we released Copilot, which probably a few of you have heard of by now. And before that, I founded a couple of companies. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to you guys. I'm going to have you give very quick intros. But also, I always think this is a fun question. Like, one is, sorry, Quinn, one non-coding cool thing that you have done with AI that's helped you in your life. I know you look bewildered by that. He's like, I don't know outside of code. But I'll turn it over to you first. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you, everyone. I'm Romain. I lead developer experience at OpenAI. So I work very closely with our product and engineering teams, especially on the API side, to make sure we provide a great DX for all of you building on the API and the platform. And ensuring we make sure you have a frictionless experience when you infuse the models into your apps. Non-code gen AI tool, hard to pick, but I'd maybe say like the Arc browser. In a non-chatbot and non-code gen use case, I love the idea of kind of like reinventing the way we browse the web, like the 5-second previews, for instance, when you mouse over the links, and also kind of like structuring your sidebar automatically thanks to AI. It was one of my favorite use cases lately.
Very cool. Quinn?
Well,
you introduced yourself already, I guess.
Yeah, there are things I like to do other than coding, but first, OpenAI released an amazing thing today, Sora, the text-to-video model. Can we give OpenAI and Romain a big round of applause for that?
Mind-blowing.
Yeah. What I have been doing is with DALL-E, your image model, I got 3 kids. My 4.5-year-old daughter loves coloring books, so I give it, make a ice princess that's eating a lot of broccoli, and I have her color it in. And she loves it.
And then you give her broccoli and get her to eat
It's
it,
subliminal
right?
messaging.
Such a good strategy. Okay, so Romain, you have quite possibly one of the coolest jobs on the planet right now. I think getting to make OpenAI accessible for developers. I'm sure you've had this vision of what you want the DX to be like. What's a big roadblock that you've hit along the way, and what was like a learning or an unlock that you discovered to work through that?
I think besides even like roadblocks, I think when you rewind like when the API for OpenAI came out about 3.5 years ago, at the time this was a GPT-3 era. And we were not so sure as a company like what builders would even build, let alone companies with that model. And at the time, like the biggest use case was actually a game, like a text generation game called AI Dungeon. That's kind of the state of affairs just 3 years ago. And of course now with like fast forward to 3.5 and then GPT-4, now we have like an entire industry of like products and businesses being built every single day with AI. So I think for us, it's not so much been about like roadblocks, but even trying to see like what can we possibly do with every one of these models? Like where do they spike? How can we let developers and builders really discover what's magical about them for them to really leverage their capabilities? So as we're thinking ahead about like DX for OpenAI, my vision is very much about like this vision setting. Like how can we let developers and builders be inspired to bring these AI models at their full potential within their products?
And just to follow up on that, has there been anything that people have done that has just blown your mind or really surprised you along the way so far that you weren't expecting?
I think it's hard to find one. I think it happens almost every week.
That's why it's one of the coolest jobs on the planet.
Right, exactly. When for instance, like DALL-E 3 came about, I think one of the surprises about that one model that you mentioned is like it became really, really good at like motivational posters. It's like, who would have thought? Like, we obviously did not train DALL-E 3 for that particular use case, but these are kind of part of the discoveries we have every day.
Lots of icebergs under the water or whatever. Awesome. All right, Quinn, we've been talking a lot about Cody, which is obviously awesome. You were out with Cody really, really fast and early, I think. And whenever you're building on top of something that's changing constantly underneath your feet, it can be really challenging. Like, what are some learnings that you had along the way of building Cody that you think would be useful for this group?
Well, building an AI product has been a total, can I swear here? It's been a total mind
It's your event.
One of the things for us as a company that had a lot of customers before we even started building any AI products was there was so much hype, there was so much interest in AI, but ultimately it only matters that people actually use it all the time. So especially a year ago, you could say AI and everyone would be like, oh, I want to try that, and you'd be on all the cool podcasts and everyone would retweet your stuff. But ultimately, if the DAU don't show up, if the customers don't show up, none of that matters. So just this intense focus on, is this truly a lovable product that is so deep in the dev workflow that every keystroke is triggering it and that people are using all the time? So we call this lovability. And it's something that applies to every product. It's not rocket science, but it's so easy to get caught up in all this AI hype and think that you're building something valuable when actually you're not.
And following up on that, do you have, I was just reading a stat today from, who was it? Ali Godsi, who was talking about rolling out AI coding co-pilots and stuff to his developers, not co-pilots specifically, but he said he's gotten like 70% of the team to use it and like 30% just like refuse. Like, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in order to continue to drive that lovability to bring along some of the people that might be still a little more reticent?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different approaches we've seen from companies. I think the approach that works best is when you just level set with people. And I think Mark mentioned this up on stage from Palo Alto Networks, where this is the future, and you need to figure out how to use these kinds of tools. It's as though someone was trying to use Notepad to write code. That wouldn't be like, oh yeah, you keep doing your thing. That would be like you need to force yourself to use an IDE, and it's tough because AI can be controversial. Some people might not like it. Some people might not like the current iteration of it. But getting the dev team bought in to realizing that 6 months in that this is going to be something that they use. And we see that in some of the stats. One stat that you can track is completion acceptance rate. So of all the ghost text, how often does the dev accept it? And it turns out that actually goes up significantly over time as developers start to get accustomed to using a code AI tool. Interestingly, it's also far lower for senior engineers than junior engineers, so it tends to be the very outspoken, opinionated senior engineers that are resisting it at first.
Do you also track like survivability of the code past the acceptance rate too, and like any interesting learnings from that so far?
Well, yeah, those same senior engineer devs, not all of whom are against this stuff, but they're kind of cranky sometimes. They would say, oh, well, that stat doesn't matter. What we actually need to see is it in the code in 60 minutes still, or does it pass review? And so we've done all that, and I really appreciate their feedback. That's why I want them actually engaged in these kinds of pilots and trials, because it's not that they're just dumb and being obstinate. They have really good points. So yeah, we've built a lot more metrics around that to win them over, and we're working on it.
Awesome. So get your best devs to use it so they get the feedback to keep improving the product, right? So Romain, I'm sure you're getting asks all the time, other than just better, faster, cheaper, whatever, like what are some of the top things that you're hearing that people want from you out of OpenAI from a DX perspective?
Yeah, they do want faster, cheaper. For sure.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah. And also that's why you see us like constantly pushing and like trying to drop the prices of the models, etc. Like we did earlier this month. I think they also mentioned latency a ton. Like when you look at a product like Cody, of course, like as you're kind of interfacing with that product, you want that to be snappy. So I think latency comes up a lot, and also we're seeing more and more sophistication now from our customers. Like we went from like the early days of tinkering with the model all the way to like fine-tuning, like trying to make the models work better for very specific use cases. Like how do we go down and how do we provide like, multiple levels of reasoning capabilities for these models, right? Like some use cases work amazingly well for GPT-4 because you need that reasoning capability. And there are some use cases where like 3.5 is actually just good enough and provides a faster experience. So I think like you'll see us like think more about like these different kind of levels of capabilities and iterate on those. Modalities also can come up a lot. You saw like a video gen today with Sora, like a new diffusion model to kind of generate videos, which is very exciting. But text-to-speech, transcriptions, and audio and vision also probably one of my favorite things that comes up a ton in terms of like enabling new things with the API. And we also see patterns. Like for instance, in the panel before, they were talking about like agents and RAG in particular. We've seen like tons of customers, trying to compute embeddings for their documents, etc. So we're trying to see how can we provide like higher level abstractions to improve that DX. And that's what we've done, for instance, with the Assistance API, like trying to take on more of the complexity, so that the developers can focus on their product experiences and what makes their apps really unique.
Yeah, again on the source, I think you must have like broken Twitter today, because literally my entire Twitter feed is just full of Sora examples. It really is incredible, and it must be, like, I can imagine it's an incredible challenge for you folks. There's so much that you're doing across so much surface area. Even just prioritizing and understanding how and where to focus must be a challenge.
It's challenging, yeah. Even Sora, for instance, like still a preview for now, but extremely exciting for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked what you're getting asked about DX. Now I'm going to put Quinn on the spot. Quinn, what do they need to do better for you? What do you want out of OpenAI? You can't say cheaper. We know cheaper is always coming. We're coming for a long time.
Yeah. I've seen OpenAI make a ton of big improvements, like having a deterministic model identifier and seed, so that you can actually get the same response given the same input. That's huge. It is so inspiring how you are building a better product and cutting prices. I think that that's a pretty rare thing for tech companies to be doing, especially for enterprise customers, and that's an inspiration. So thank you for doing that. Keep on doing that. And one thing for our customers is a lot of them, as you saw from Ron and Leidos, is they operate in incredibly sensitive environments. So the more that you can take the very best models which you have and make them so that people in very strict deployment environments can use them, the better. So like dedicated capacity and other things like that. We have a lot of customers using Azure OpenAI service and really appreciate all the stuff you did to make that available.
Awesome. Romain, I'm going to ask you now to pull out your crystal ball. I mean, one thing that I certainly see as an investor, and I'm sure you guys too, is there's people building at all parts of the development lifecycle. That was mentioned earlier too, right? We've got AI tools for testing, and we've got AI like coding co-pilots, and we've got others that will go and do like tech debt cleanup and all kinds of different things that people are building. Like, how do you think that evolves in the future? Do we have enough power that we end up having in the underlying foundational models that there's really like one tool that we use for all of this? Or do you think there's going to be this, this universe of options for different points in the SDLC?
I think that's a great question. I think we'll probably go in a little bit of both direction, is my guess. We'll see like more specialized tools in the future that like take on, as you say, like very specific tasks of like porting over legacy code bases, or like trying to specialize in one particular vertical. But at the same time, as the models and the capabilities become more powerful, it's very likely that it's going to be like integrating multiple workflows at once. Like we see, for instance, like using something like Cody, it's probably making you more productive than going back and forth with ChatGPT and VS Code. So I think there is a ton of value also in bringing the things together. I think to me, what's extremely exciting about this direction is that we currently have maybe 50 million software engineers in the world, and it's very likely that by having this interface where you can actually direct and architect a bit more like what's happening, and not just writing code, but also kind of architecting your apps, we might create like 1 billion software engineers, right? Like the ability for this creativity to unlock like massive software development and creation in the future. So I think that's like the thing I'm the most excited about.
Yeah, I'm smiling. It's such a perfect segue to my next question, and one of my favorite questions to ask people right now is, I share your view, right? I think this creates an incredible opportunity to unlock human creativity. One of the questions that I have, though, is assuming that's the case, if you project, really far forward, 5-10 years out at the pace that we're going now, assuming that could possibly continue, like, what happens to the software ecosystem in the sense that, I've spent my entire career in open source, and we've got a gazillion different JavaScript frameworks and database options and all these different pieces. Like, are humans gonna still be building most of those things. As we kind of like grow up in levels of abstraction, do we need all of that anymore? Do we need all these different options, or do you think AI systems will kind of standardize on common sets of components to solve common problems, and instead of having, I think there's 470 million projects on GitHub now, something like that. Like, do we need that many? Like, building blocks. I get the app level stuff, but do we need so many building blocks?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen whether the AI and the code gen space in particular will kind of try to, converge onto some set of tools, or if you're going to end up creating even more for every particular use case. But one thing I've noticed as a developer myself is that sometimes you're kind of like paralyzed by like, what library am I going to use for this UI component? I have to test like all 12 of them to kind of pick and choose. And conversely, when you go on something like v0.dev and you like upload a screenshot, GPT Vision understands like what you're trying to accomplish and spits out the code for you. It's like, oh yeah, I did not have to think about which UI library to pick.
Yeah.
At least it did that work for me. So I'm not exactly sure what will happen in terms of like standardization, as you say, but I think for sure, like I'm sure we'll have in the future like developers that are creating, apps like by themselves, like a solo founder bringing a product to life and at scale, simply because they can spend most of their time architecting and like iterating with the models as opposed to actively writing code.
Yeah. Quinn, I've got to ask you this question too.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes when you're coding, you can tell that for this thing I'm doing, an AI could do it better. It's a rote task. And sometimes when you're coding, you can tell, like, I'm actually using the knowledge that I have. I've been thinking about this for years, or I met with a customer, I understand the problem. And the more that we can have devs spending their time on that stuff, we're all better off. And we've just been piling on layers and layers of abstraction so that we have compilers that do a lot of work for us. We have a GUI. And I mean, that felt scary probably to those COBOL engineers that are now sitting on the beach retired, but I think they're better off, and we're going to be better off maybe sitting on the beach, retired someday ourselves. We'll be okay.
Oh yeah, I'm certain of that. I'm just curious how this all evolves. And yeah, that 220 billion lines of COBOL code in the government thing is still very much in my head. I just, there's a lot. I didn't know there was quite that much. It's unbelievable. And I'm sure AI, I know IBM's doing some stuff on this front, but I'm sure AI will continue to help us with that. I know we're about out of time. So Quinn, we've got this incredible audience of builders that you've brought together. Like, what do you want them to take away from your lessons learned in building Cody that you think will help them bring AI into their own organizations?
Well, if you're using it internally, know that next time you go through airport security, the people building that are using Code AI, so your organization should be as well. Try to make it, this focus on lovability. Do not buy into the hype. Like, acknowledge that Code AI is a big benefit today, but it's still got a long way to go before it is completely perfect, and that's okay. It can still be lovable for what it does today, and work with the people that are doubters and level set with them.
Awesome. And Romain, final question. What would you like people here to leave with? Like, what's a pro tip or something that you have for them?
I'd say multimodality, to me, is still underrated. I think we have yet to see, this new era of software, hardware, all combining, like speech, vision, like all of these things combined. So I think that's probably one of the things I'm the most excited about for the months and years to come. So, and also I want to say, one of my favorite parts of this job is really to spend a lot of my time with founders, builders, tinkerers, like many of you here. And so really, what we want to get done at OpenAI and the platform play in particular is ensuring that all of you can build not just cool demos, but also build amazing products for your own customers. So always excited to spend time with all of you. So if you have any more questions after this talk, I'd love to hear what you're building with AI.
Awesome. And with that, I think it's our time to wrap up. But thank you both, guys, for this great conversation. I'm sure there are many more questions to come over drinks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
All right. That's it. Thank you everyone for coming. There's drinks and have a happy hour, go meet each other, and a lot of stuff to talk about. Thank you again to everyone for coming, and for everyone who's building amazing stuff in AI. Take care, everyone.